10. I did my undergrad. I had hair probably as long as his, but unfortunately mine was luxurious and wouldn't ever go into a nice ponytail.
I reckon we're going to peak any day.
I also spent most of my undergrad with fellow colleagues standing protesting in South Africa against apartheid, and we had exciting days in our university at the time. And then I had to go and do what was called military service, and they called me up for a year. But when I was there, they said, we need you guys, you have to do 2 years. It actually stretched out into 2.5, so I wasted 2.5 years of my life in a brown uniform, but it really, really crystallized one thing in my mind. I wasn't going to do anything like that ever again. I was going back to university, and I was keen to get back into some research sort of career, and at that stage I wasn't all that directed, in that I had a number of different interests ranging from zoology through botany to biochemistry to environmental stuff, and so I became a generalist. And as you will see if you look through my track record as well, I have published in geology journals, I've published in zoology journals, and I've published in botanical journals. So again, I think part of what was driving us at the time was really just a curiosity and an interest in research, and it wasn't particularly strategic. What I would say in hindsight is that the strategic planning I did was, the first question was, what did you need to do to get an academic position? Or did you want to become a full-time researcher? In my day in South Africa, full-time researchers didn't exist, and the only jobs you could get in academia was really a teaching research position. And I've been in a teaching research position my whole life, except for a couple of breaks to go and do study periods where I've had research leave, etc. The whole idea of PD for academics in my day was, well, you now have arrived at your first lectureship. You have 60 lectures to give in the second half of the year. It's now Friday. You start on Monday at 8:30, and you will be lecturing 5 days a week and running 3 labs a week for all the biology students doing agriculture. That was my first job. It was exciting. I wrote lectures at night, I gave them during the day, I interacted with students in the afternoon, and then I said to myself, I actually need to do some research. There wasn't very much time, but that's the way it is. Then mentorship. How much mentorship did we get? Well, I think when I was going through, I was really, really lucky to be in a class of 12 or 13 people who did things without mentors. We actually competed. Of those 12 people who graduated with me, 8 are professors, and 1 is now an associate or a member of the American Academy of Science, who's the first South African in 40 years to get there. We, I think, actually worked off each other. There was this sort of spirit of having to get out and to do things, despite who our supervisors were in many ways. Our supervisors, mine when I arrived to do my PhD, he called me in just before Christmas and said, this is the broad area I want you to work on. I'm going on study leave for 6 months, so I'll see you in June, July when I get back. So I had 6 months to really set up the project, which was fantastic because I could do what I wanted to do. I wasn't being told what to do. So that was really good. When it came to writing up time, he said, cheers, I'm off for a year's study leave in Israel. So I decided not to hold that up, actually try and get my golf handicap down to single figures. So again, John, it took me a little bit longer than 3 to 4 years. It took me 5 years, of which I dedicated 1 year to 4 days a week playing golf. I only ever got down to a 10 handicap, which is one of the regrets I have. I should have gone to 5 days of golf a week.
It's plenty of time left, Will.
Really, it was quite tricky. And again, I think the pressures weren't what they are today, so we got away with quite a lot of that sort of stuff. At the same time, I was lucky that I was working in the collaborative program. It was called the Corporate International Programs in South Africa. And we had regular meetings, we had regular interactions with people from overseas, and we had a thing called Mediterranean Systems sort of conferences, which took place every 3 years. So I developed an international network of colleagues within 3 to 4 years. And I now look at that and say, that really was fantastic to get that network going so early. And I've been able to use that network in that a recent paper I did in one of the top journals. I was invited to go purely because I'd met these people at conferences. And it was those opportunities, I think, which really were important. What were the drivers of research behaviour at the time? Well, in South Africa, they were into metrics long before Australia. We were ranked as individuals, not as a university, so they didn't have an era thing. We had an individual ranking system. If you wanted to get promoted in the university, you had to be research active and you had to have a certain level of research activity. That I'll show you in a moment is an interesting pathway that I went through. But I think the real driver for me, and I think Ken expressed it earlier, is that I was doing something that I enjoyed. And that really for me was fantastic. That's my whole career in one overhead. Basically, that's the number of papers per year and all of the different events in my life, except for my personal life, which isn't there. Married, divorced, married, child 1 and child 2, but it has no effect on any of those.
What's the question mark?
That question mark I'm coming to.
Is that a golf year?
That was not the golf year. The golf year was before. So the golf year was actually quite a productive year, and then I got at least 2 papers out. So all of those, as you look along there, are papers. The ones with the yellow stars are where I'm the senior author, and all the rest are where I have collaborated, and they are mainly with postgraduate students. I've supervised somewhere between 25 and 30 HDRs, and many of them have gone on into universities. 6 of them are actually academics at various universities, and like Ken, 2 or 3 are much better than me, and I still collaborate with quite a lot of them. What's, I think, important there is I actually published before my PhD came out, but I had a sequence of events that I think were really, really important for my development. The first was to get overseas to do a postdoc. In other words, get out of your local institution, meet other people, and do what you have to do. Really, really critical. Then I took a job at KwaZulu-Natal University where I lectured biology to agrics, which is at KZN, which is very close to the next job, which was at UCT. There were reasons for that I'll talk about in a moment. ASL was my first study leave in San Diego. The second ASL was at ANU, and then the third one was 6 months I had last year as well. What you can see with those academic study leave periods is that productivity goes up. Those are the only 3 periods in my life where I haven't been a teacher researcher. So there is a balance between teaching and research that you have to maintain. And the important one is that rare one, where I was head of school and program convener for biology, earth and environmental sciences at the university I was at. Biology, earth and environmental sciences required me to get 7 departments together and to come up with a common teaching program across 7 departments. Botany, zoology, oceanography, archaeology, geology, environmental and geographical sciences, and another one. Every single professor and head of those departments had their own ideas, and I suspect that that question mark that you see there is a consequence of me taking my eye off the ball with research and spending many, many, many hours in committee rooms, discussing things, trying to negotiate things, and all of that sort of stuff. Hence the reason why I took the lead and went to RSBS at ANU for the year in 2002, and I think that clarified my mind. When I got back to Cape Town, they said, "Oh, good, back. I need to merge the botany and zoology." Which I said, I had to move country to that level of administration. And I would proudly say that I managed my way up into success. But things slowly drifting back towards the admin.
You might have a chat to you at work.
What's on the bottom is NRF ratings. And that's basically every 4 years you had to put in the rating. One of the drivers there is that you had to be internationally recognised. In other words, be rated higher to get promoted from senior lecturer to associate professor. It was non-negotiable. You had to do it. The biggest crunch in my life was my first rating, 10 or 11 papers, early career, less than 5 years since PhD, and they classified me as research inactive. I was really steaming. I went out and got my own grants. I did my own research. I got all of the stuff lined up. It said, stuff you. And as a consequence, you can see that my ranking went up very quickly thereafter. And that was purely because of that crunch from a panel. And unfortunately, the KZN professor was chair of the panel, and I declined his offer to join his research group when I was at KZN, because as head of department, he said, all of you work for me. And I said, no, I do not. And that is what created a lot of the uncomfortableness and why I actually moved universities. So that sort of thing was absolutely fortuitous, but I think it put me in a much better place. I didn't plan that. I didn't plan to have the, should we say, the slight clash of personality with the new head of that school, but these things happen, and you just got to say, I've got to move. And I think that's came through. I think Grant was saying, move around and develop your networks and get them all going as much as possible. The quality-quantity debate, teams versus individuals. We've heard from Daniel how good teams are. My discipline, ecology, we don't work in teams. We're individuals, and I work with you for one project, and I work with you for another project, etc., etc. So for a lot of what I've done, I've actually built collaborative networks, not teams. So it's been fun, and I've worked with lots of different people. And in the old school I was in Cape Town, I published with everybody in that school except for one. So I published with 11 of my colleagues. I just find it quite hard to publish in the marine area because terrestrial ecology and marine ecology sort of have this beach. And that beach is actually wider than most oceans in terms of the way people think. The other thing I really stress is to get involved with supervision. Without supervising HDR students, I wouldn't have been able to have developed my research career. They have been absolutely fantastic. A lot of those papers which I haven't marked as first author, I've actually written because the students have done most of the work but haven't taken it to the nth degree. I had to do it. So there is a responsibility as supervisor to actually do some of that. The other thing which unfortunately has happened is we're now in the world of research metrics. We've heard the words mentioned earlier, and unfortunately we can't hide anymore because it's all out there. And I'll show you in a moment. You can get anything you like out there. Here is one, Grant Success is another one, Web of Science, Scopus, Google Scholar, Publish or Perish, it's all out there. How many of you have a Google Scholar page? Okay. Interesting, because if you're going to have a look at ECU now, you'll see that there are more and more people putting up their pages. Why do it? It actually gets your work out there. You can actually get it to send you an email saying every time you cite it, who cited you, what paper, whatever. So you don't have to chase around looking. It comes straight to you. Things are so much easier now than writing up reprint request cards and saying, oh, I need this paper and I need that paper.
Go tear it all, man. What's a reprint request card?
You wait 6 weeks, it doesn't come, so you write another one. It's an absolute pain. Now you just do it all from your desk. Then we have this dreaded H index, M index. How many people know that H index? Ah, more people. How many know your M index? M quotient. This is the new one. It's basically your H index divided by the length of your career.
Oh, that's unfair.
And there's a reason why you have that. And the reason is that one of my very, should we say, aggressive researchers, postdoc researchers from the US, has gone and analysed in the world of ecology what predicts success. And you can, as I said, go to any of these things and pull out all of these H indices and all of that sort of stuff. He's then taken those and he's gone and analysed them in the world of ecology to see what they actually mean. What does an H index really mean? And what you will find is that your H index is related to how many publications you've got out. So there is a direct relationship. What's the correlation? 0.93 or whatever it is. There's a good reason why you have to keep publishing. If people are able to look you up, they're able to evaluate you, that's one of the reasons. The ones in red on there are all the members of the National Academy of Science from the ecological fraternity, and you can see, I think in my discipline, somewhere around 30 to 35 H-index, that's you're on your way. What are the other predictors? Daniel mentioned the impact of a good paper. There's another one. The correlation is not as good. And the other one, which is really good, is how many years you've been at it. So the old buggers like us in the room will have higher indices than the younger people in the room. Hence the reason for the M index, or M quotient, is to try and correct for so these things...
Will,
yep.
I'm now planning the JFJ index, where you take your H index and multiply it by your weight.
That's a good one. I like that. The other thing with this whole thing of metrics is that all of you come from different disciplines. Citation rates differ by discipline. So an H-index in my discipline is equivalent, an H-index of 1 is equivalent to an H-index of about 20 in neurosciences. So if you look at those lines there, maths, computer science, psychology, various others, social science, generally have low citation rates. Then you get the sciences, the sort of chemistry, physics, and all the rest of it, and then you get the health and medical sciences up the top. So when people are talking about H indices, you really need to know what it means in your own discipline. Don't just use metrics for the sake of metrics. It doesn't help you at all. And it's very critical that you actually have some of this information. When you're going for grants and things, you need to say my H index is 9 and I work in a field which has a low H index and this is considered to be good. Whereas if you're sitting up against somebody from neurosciences or whatever and theirs is 19, is that as good as a 9 in computer science? Probably not. So it's important that you understand how to use some of these metrics for yourself. What I think in conclusion is that every journey is different and very personal, but you have to ask yourself the question, are you really enjoying the journey or is it a burden? If research and publishing is a burden, I suggest now that you find something else to do because it will be a burden for the rest of your life. If you're passionate and really enjoy it, you will find time, unfortunately, over weekends and at night when the kids have gone to bed and various things, to do that little bit extra. It's not how many hours you work at work, it's how many hours you work outside of work. If you have a partner who's accommodating, that's fantastic. If you have a partner who isn't able to accommodate you, that's unfortunate. Choose what suits your personality and ambitions. I have really enjoyed my career because I've got out, I've travelled the world, I've specialised on Mediterranean ecosystems. They come with good wine, they come with good food, good history, visiting Italy, visiting Chile, visiting Australia, South Africa, all these places is absolutely fantastic. And a couple of weeks ago I was in Spain, in Tarifa, just near Gibraltar, measuring photosynthetic rates of plants on the beach, and it was really, really hot. My colleagues all believed that I was on holiday, but I had to bring the pictures back. The other thing I really have to stress is that in my field and some of your fields, you have to collaborate. You just cannot not collaborate. One of the strong reasons for collaboration is that the more authors you have on the paper, the more chance you have that other people will be reading around that, because they might look for somebody and find you and then get into your one. So it's a whole network and sort of hopscotch arrangement. So do that. I, in regret, will say that I had one single authored paper. It's the very first one in my career. And that was because my supervisor was overseas at the time and didn't respond by fax. He sent his comments back to me by snail mail. That was even before computers. And hence he got left off. And he was quite upset. The other thing is, if you go and have a look at people who've done really well, Peter Doherty, who's the Nobel Prize winner in immunology from the 1990s here in Australia, opens his book with a saying that if it's not published, the work has not been done. And as the chair of the Animal Ethics Committee, I will also say that if you're using animals, if you're using public money, you have to publish. It is your responsibility and obligation to get the information out there so that animals aren't wasted or people aren't wasted in having to repeat those experiments. Those experiments have to be put out there. So I think there are a lot of things that one looks at, but I think my take-home message from all of this is keep it consistent every year. My target was 4 to 5 publications a year, like Ken's. I haven't achieved 5, I'm somewhere around the 4 and a bit. If I add in book chapters and other things, I can fool myself that it's up there. But it is actually really important. So as you're producing something, to have the next thing ready or developing it to go, and kick ass with students to get things finished. It really is important to get things done because students can sit back and then suddenly they're gone and you don't have the data. So there are major issues there. So thank you very much.